Next Curve.
Welcome, everyone, to the Next Curve Rethink podcast. And as you all know, we're here to break down the latest tech and industry events and happenings in the world of mobile and telecom and many other things into the insights that matter. I'm Leonard Lee, executive analyst at Next Curve, and I'm joined by two very special guests, Dean Bubley of Disruptive Analysis and Andrew Collinson of Connective Insights. And these two gentlemen are going to help me unpack the stuff that mattered at MWC 2026. And we'll cover impressions of what are the key themes of the event, highlights that impressed us, and our prognostications for what we think will carry the industry in 2026. So, gentlemen, welcome. Nice meeting you in the metaverse. Is metaverse still a thing, Dean?
Was it ever a thing?
Good question. Well, you know what? Yeah, it's great to have both of you on. I'm really looking forward to the discussion. I'm sure that the audience is going to be absolutely thrilled. But of course, everyone wants to know, Dean, how did things look from the outside of the Fira Gran Via?
Yeah, I spent the week not at MWC, but I was more at what I call the sort of either Dean WC or MWC fringe. So I spent most of it either having coffee with people or watching the various keynotes from the comfort of a cafe or a hotel room. On one occasion, actually sitting on a park bench by the beach, watching the streaming on the streaming channel. So thanks to the Mobile World Live guys for that. Well, but no, it was interesting for me because I've done this for a couple of years, and you sort of sit outside it a bit. You got a little bit more luxury of time to sort of watch some of the things that go on stage, and you meet people when they're not dashing around with like 15 minutes slots with their hair on fire. So I feel like I got a decent read of what was going on.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, hey, before we get started, because we have Disruptive Dean on, please remember to like, share, and react, comment on this episode. Also, subscribe here on YouTube and on Buzzsprout. Listen to us on your favorite podcast platform. Opinions and statements by my guests are their own and don't reflect mine or those of Next Curve. We're doing this to provide a open forum for discussion and debate on all things mobile and telecom tech and industry. And this is for informational purposes only. But also we have Andrew Collinson of Connective Insights. So why don't we get things kicked off? Impressions, since you were actually in the Fira with me, right? And we bumped into each other several times. Serendipitously, right? I might add. But why don't we start off with you? What were your impressions of the event at a high level? Key themes.
Sure, thanks, Leonard. First of all, I'd spent the first day mainly in the keynotes and meeting a couple of people there, which was interesting. And then the rest of the time, I was in a couple of summits. I was in the security summit, and then I went into the Open Gateway summit. And then I bumped around looking at, mainly Leonard, it seemed, but, meeting people and looking at the stands and so on. So I kind of got and I was also outside the fair, occasionally even met Dean Bubley. So I had a fairly broad experience of the whole thing. And what I felt most of all, or if you like, my first superficial impression was, it wasn't one of those years where there was one big topic. Now, we can talk a lot about AI, and obviously AI was on the menu, but it wasn't like a year ago or 2 years ago where AI was the sort of, it was really a headline, but nothing else. AI had been kind of absorbed into what everybody thinks is normal. Which I think is a reflection of modern, executive life, particularly. If you're in a white collar profession, you're using it a lot and you're seeing it. Now, it's not mature as an enterprise grade solution for many places, but it just felt it had come off the hype burner. And I didn't really think there was anything else to fill that. And I then thought a lot about more about what I was thinking. And in the end, I came to the view that a lot of what we saw was about trust.
Yeah.
Because clearly we live in a world of geopolitical, very, very fast changing and quite disruptive political forces. And that's destroying trust at a number of levels. And that it sadly creates an opportunity to be if you can be a party that is helping deliver trusted interactions, then that's really one of the great opportunities. And I think it's quite interesting because you look at operators and you think, there's a lot of bemoaning operators not being tremendously innovative, but they don't really invest a huge amount of their R&D, in R&D, it's 1% or so. So they can't really be expected to be producing new technologies. And what are they? They're carriers, they're operators, they operate things. And I think that gives them the opportunity in some places to operate things in a way that delivers trust to their clients. So I illustrate a few examples of it. One of them is sovereignty, and I know Dean and I are doing some work on that for Unthinkable. Another is the whole kind of API stuff, the network API stuff about identity and SID swap and so on. It's another form of trust. There were some quite interesting demos of things that were kind of call screening. And so I've also been doing a lot of work in AI voice. So there was a lot of interesting stuff about AI voice, which is really exploding. So, and obviously I'm looking for that. So I see it. I think the other commentary I would give, which came out through some of my discussions around the stuff I wrote about it, was the other way you could look at it is you could say 6G is not ready. AI is not quite hitting the road with all the benefits. And probably satellite's the only other thing that's around which is kind of really big and shiny. So satellite got a bit of a kind of airing on the stage. So I think there was a bit of contextual business if there's not one big, new technological wave rushing through the industry that everybody's trying to get on top of, and the geopolitical stuff behind it, which is really creating that kind of not exactly a vacuum, but this opportunity around trust in different domains. So that's what I felt about it. Anyway, that was you asked, and that's what I thought.
Yeah, and you wrote that piece last week. Was it last week?
The beginning of this week.
The Valley Beneath the Surface.
Actually.
Yeah. Really well done. So folks should check it out. It gives you a really great perspective on trust and you want to call it the unfortunate opportunity that operators have with maybe positioning themselves as trust providers or enablers.
So I would say, in terms of things I noticed and the discussions I had and the things, the first thing is there wasn't much mobile at Mobile World Congress. I think certainly listening to the keynotes, I heard much more about fiber, subsea, satellite than I did about 5G. Which I thought was interesting. The AT&T CEO was talking about saying, well, basically he sees telecoms as a dense grid of fiber with different accesses hanging off the end of it. And that was an interesting framing.
Yeah.
The other thing is I agree with Andrew, there was a fair bit about voice communications, and I've been talking about a renaissance of voice for some time. And I used to run workshops 15 years ago called The Future of Voice, and it seems like the future is about now. And then there was definitely, on the other side of trust and geopolitics, there's quite a lot about, there's a theme I did picked up last year, just the signs of that really kicked off this year, was the convergence between telecoms and defence, and I think that's something that's we're going to see more of for obvious reasons. And then there's this sort of physical AI, and I know you noticed a post I wrote on that the other day.
Yeah, that was entitled "Tyranny of Consensus," right? So you tackled two buzzwords of the conference, 6G and physical AI, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's this the physical AI is this term. It's not bad. It's like IoT meets AI. It's sort of smart things which aren't smartphones. So it's robots, it's autonomous vehicles, it's AR, VR, it's industrial automation with AI. Pixie dust sprinkled over it. It's things which exist in the real world and use sensing and AI to decide what to do. Yeah, and whether that's an autonomous vehicle, whether it's a drone, whether it's a humanoid robot, you can sort of see that there's an appeal for lots of different stakeholder groups, whether it's the radio people, the device vendors, the cloud players, the AI model providers, even politicians, core network providers. Everyone has an angle on it, and they quite like it because it's sort of all the stuff which is that never happened with 5G. It's where bundling it all together and giving it like a sci-fi sheen with a picture of a drone and a robot to compete with the people selling rockets and nuclear powered data centers and all the other sci-fi stuff that's going on, and say, hey, and see there's things like this idea of kinetic tokens that people were talking about. I think T-Mobile US, which as far as I can see is slicing meets ultra reliable low latency repackaged and rebranded in a way that makes it look vaguely billable, and perhaps regulators won't stand on it.
It's all got a bit of a whiff of sulfur about it to me. It kind of like you look at it and you think, listen to it and you think, what? What are you actually talking about? Let's say robots. I think, okay, I understand your drones. Yeah, oh, fair enough. But physical AI, it's there's probably a German word for this, isn't there? The words that are kind of like smashed together into sort of meaninglessness in some sense. But sorry, I shouldn't be so skeptical. But
No, I mean, I don't think you're being skeptical. It's a branding twist, or it's a marketing twist. A lot of the things that they're packing into physical AI are things that have already existed for a really long time. It's nothing new. Whether it's the association of digital twins or IoT or sensor technology. These are all things that we're very familiar with. It's just, I think it boils down
to packaging. It's a packaging exercise. But I thought your point, Dean, about the kind of 6G and physical AI was a really well made point. You've got convergent agendas that can produce an accidental outcome that's actually not what tremendously desirable.
But it's also as Leonard said, all this stuff has been around. So it's not like drones and robots are waiting around for 6G to rescue them from their lack of connectivity. And this is the typical thing the mobile industry does time and time again, whereas it positions itself as the critical single enabler of all this cool new stuff of, we will be contributing to trillions of dollars of GDP because no robot or drone would be able to work without us. And I sometimes stereotype it is a bit like the person who turns up at a party at 3:00 in the morning with a cheap bottle of wine going, hey, I'm here now, the party can get started. And everyone looks at them and goes, who the hell are you? It's like, who invited them? And I have a feeling that 6G is trying to sort of gate crash existing parties. No, absolutely. 6G will add to, it could be vehicles, it could be drones, but that's like incremental, and it will have to integrate and fit within those existing systems. Right. It's not there's going to be stuff which is 6G native and like, we've thankfully you've arrived. We've been waiting till 2032.
But
that's not happening.
And I think that is actually a better perspective for the industry to whole than what they've traditionally done with like getting ahead of themselves with these use cases. The thing is, this transition, and I know that you hate the term cyber physical. I have no idea why, Dean. This guy hates all kinds of words. It's like really weird. But here's the thing: the infrastructure, the network is changing, whether we like it or not. The way that they're defining 6G, the integrated sensing and communications, but also the high precision positioning. There are all these new functions that are coming out that are being repurposed. Actually, these are functions that the network and the infrastructure already kind of has that it uses in delivering the air interface. It's just now you're looking at new features that are capitalizing on these capabilities, right? These physical capabilities that now end users can tap into, right? Developers can eventually tap into, that enable. It's actually not mobile computing. It's positioning the infrastructure as kind of like the sensor, right? So ISAC, for instance, it basically converts the network into a radar. So, but the capabilities that these new features introduce, I don't think should be so trivialized, because in the let's say, for instance, smart cities, holistically, right, it can introduce a new capability for, let's say, creating spatial mappings at a higher sample rate than what we have today, right? So there's an opportunity to think beyond just connectivity, and consider and contemplate applications that haven't been possible before.
I agree, and I think that ISAC is a particularly interesting one,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure that actually the eye makes as much sense. And for example, do we, even taking on board what you just said for smart cities, does every country on the planet need 3 competing radar networks?
Yeah, I saw you write about that.
I'm actually meeting with someone from a regulator tomorrow to specifically talk about what the regulatory surface around sensing is in terms of spectrum, in terms of privacy. I mean, even just the fact, competition. You're right. It's interesting, but is it something that belongs in a public mobile network, or all of the public mobile networks, or is it something that's a bit more like some of the specialist networks we see for defense or rail or utilities? And so, yes, maybe you should have a shared city radar network. Firstly, because it means you can put the infrastructure in the places that need it. Secondly, that you've got governance, that because there's going to be national security implications, there's going to be a completely different regulatory surface. There might be a different physical siting for it. So, absolutely, and you might want to have sensor fusion, so you combine the wireless radar function, frankly, with cameras.
Yeah.
So ideally, you have a network of cameras and a network of radar capabilities, and probably pollution sensors and motion sensors and a bunch of other stuff. And you have some clever sensor fusion layer which blends it all together. And is that something that belongs in 6G, or is that the sensing function, and maybe you plug in Wi-Fi sensing for the indoors, and you have the fiber sensing to look at underground and a bunch of other stuff, right? So completely agree that sensing is interesting. I'm just not sure it belongs in a public 6G network.
I think it's incumbent on the industry to offer as an alternative, as you cited in your tyranny of consensus piece, right? It's an option. I think there is some uniqueness to it. It's just all a matter of the industry just thinking through the details, like what you're suggesting, and then articulating how it's a viable alternative for developers, for solution architects, in either augmenting existing applications or innovating in new frontiers, right? And I guess that's the point that I'm making, because Wi-Fi is doing the same thing, right? I mean, they're doing there's all kinds of new sensing features, but that doesn't mean that
you get sensing in subsea cables, even. There's sensing everywhere throughout the entire network.
Of challenges for sensing as well, in the sense that it potentially has quite a lot of privacy and security implications, and I mean interference is perhaps the wrong one, but certainly privacy and security. And I mean, it feels to me like, I'll tell you what it feels like. I'm not sure that it is, but those diagrams you always get when you have a new network evolution, which has a triangle and a load of circles and things like that on it. Like you used to get clouds in the old days. It's that kind of diagram. And it's one of those things that always pops up on the new network diagram. And I think it's sort of a bit like, what should we put in here? Oh, let's chuck sensing in. It feels a bit like light on consideration. I'm not saying it's a bad idea.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it doesn't seem very thought through from what I've seen. But maybe I'm wrong. Dean, you're deeper in it than I am, but that's what I feel about it.
I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff. I met up with the ETSI standards group that's looking at ISAC and sensing, and there's particularly a lot of interest around drone detection is the one that everyone talks about, and then also vehicle to vehicle or vehicle to X. And I think both of those are very interesting. But again, drone detection, you don't. Well, firstly, you probably prioritize certain areas. So airports, frankly, data centers, other places which are vulnerable. If you look at what's happened over the last week in the Gulf, the places you have to worry about drones are the sort of strategic national infrastructure locations, which includes compute facilities and energy facilities and things, which are not traditionally the areas which are telco strongholds. And certainly, if I look at it from a European lens, they're the place that if you had ISAC plus the AI to interpret it, you suddenly put yourself in the category of sort of high risk AI use cases, and you are regulated to the max. Whereas if you're doing it to find someone's lost dog, or is there a parking space or something like that, it's a much lower bar. But I think we need to think, what's it for? And do you end up then exposing the regulators to yet more regulation? And I think that no one's even started looking at what ISAC regulation looks like. You could argue that
the drone detection version. I mean, let's say you got a network running right now and you can detect drones. What are you going to do with that information? How is it going to be useful? When you're normally detecting drones, it's attached to a radar and a rocket at the other end of it, or some sort of defense mechanism, or an alert to the area in which, if it's an airport or something like that. I cannot see a public network in that role at the moment, or at least without significant consideration of the pros and cons of benefits and whys and wherefores. What if there's a gap in coverage and it doesn't see it? Are you liable? What if what if it's too slow? What if you miss?
Yeah.
Really? You're going to go down that track? I mean, and where else are you going to use drone detection? I mean, it could be useful to say, well, someone's overflying.
Yeah, and I think that
that might be more realistic. I don't know.
Yeah, and this is where I think let's call it prevailing, or the use cases that are at the center of explaining a technology sometimes can do a disservice for the technology. I think it actually has some pretty good potential in active spatial twinning. So if there's a particular space and you want to create a quote unquote spatial twin or digital twin of a space, it helps you spatially contextualize the area. And then you can use features like a precision positioning to track things that are actually connected to the network, versus trying to detect a drone flying around that isn't even registered with the network. There are these other applications that you can consider, and it's just one part. It's one element that extends the possibility of, let's say, a broader or more expansive application that may be more valuable than just what ISAC does functionally within the context of that solution. Do you follow what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I do, but it's also got to coexist with the camera sensing and LiDAR and UWB at short range and all the rest of it.
Yes.
So it's part of that. Yeah, I mean, a few years ago, I went to a sensor exhibition or a trade show, and I was just blown away by how many different sorts of sensor there are.
Oh,
From depth perception to motion to chemical sensors to density to you name it, every possible physical characteristic, there's 5 solutions for it. And I think that as well as the tyranny of consensus, the other phrase I used was assumption of uniqueness. And the risk is that the mobile industry thinks that we have the only way of doing sensing, when in fact they fit into an existing really complicated sensing landscape. And this could well be a valuable add-on, but there's also limits to it. And there'll be other things where you use UWB, or you use, frankly, a $20 camera and some cheap image recognition.
Yeah, and you know what?
I think your points about like the cases that are sensible are really good, but the problem is a lot of the cases that are being put out there are not really good. And what I think, and like everybody in the world has got limited attention. So if you come to me with a sensing case and I've got 5 minutes to think about it, and you come to me with a silly one, I'm just going to think you're talking rubbish. And I don't mean me. I'm the regulator. I'm your customer. I'm your investor. If you're talking nonsense use cases, you're expecting people to apply a level of imagination and knowledge that they probably don't have. And I sometimes think the industry lacks. I've never heard the story about the boy with no, the emperor's new clothes. Yeah. Where they just haven't spent enough time arguing about it, which is something, as you know, it spent a lot of time doing. Going, that's rubbish. Well, why does that make sense? And it's I suppose in a way it's quite good for us because it helps us make a living, but it can be quite frustrating sometimes that people just haven't put it through the washer a bit more.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why, in my observation of with what is it, industrial 5G, if you want to call it that, private networks and stuff like that, has been such a challenging thing. There's this idea of uniqueness, as you're alluding to, right? It's the only thing that can deliver URLLC, which just happened to be really, really expensive and challenging to realize in an industrial setting, much less out in the, in a macro network, right? So the sole focus, assuming that, your technology is unique, which it's not. If you go into the industrial IoT, there are all kinds of protocols out there, different, a lot of different technologies that are being used for wireless, but also the singular focus on connectivity has also undermined the positioning of 5G in industrial and enterprise scenarios, right, and context. So I think that it's really undermined the progress that people had anticipated with 5G private networks, especially for enterprise and industrial. So these are all great points, but the thing is the deficit at the moment is that exercise that you're alluding to, Andrew, is that debate, and then somehow advancing the thinking beyond just generic and sort of a shooting from a hip type of concept that undersells the technology, right, and its potential to enable innovation and
I'll tell you one area I've seen an interesting thing, and forgive me, Dean, I'm going to say something nice about the GSMA. They have a program called Fusion, which is kind of the sister program to the Open Gateway program. So they realized that what they needed to do was get closer to enterprise demand. So they've got a program called Fusion where they're going out and talking to enterprises and finding out what they actually need and want and turning those into statements of requirement. And I think that's good. I mean, I think that's a step forward. I mean, I've looked at some of the cases. I haven't been deep enough in. I'm just about to do a little more research in APIs, so I will be in that. I can see Dean smiling, so I imagine he's got something.
Well, something else I posted yesterday, which is if you're going to ask some enterprises what they want, we want our own spectrum to build our own networks.
Yeah.
We don't want to buy it from you, and that's perhaps one of the answers that will be quite difficult, because I'm a big believer that there should be essentially an enterprise spectrum users association who speaks with a similar weight to GSMA, to regulators and ITU and others. But at the moment, it's quite difficult to get everyone from Miami Airport to Jaguar Land Rover to the BBC to the US military in a room saying, actually, we quite like to have a couple 100 megahertz for our private networks, which are with this specification and these power levels and so on. Because frankly, we think that we can do it better. And I think that's a difficult one. No, I take your point. I mean, and to be fair, it's good to see that GSMA is paying attention to enterprise, whether it's on the API side of things or whether it's on connectivity. You know, I'm a slicing skeptic, but certainly it makes sense. And they brought together some communities of interest from memory automotive and a couple of others. No, they exist. But I mean, 5G ACIA. I mean, is that just because people got bored with 5G ACIA, which is the industrial automation group, and 5G AA, which is the automotive? Right. So they seem to have picked the two verticals where there's already existing trade associations. So maybe they're just trying to poach members. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe easier. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it might be just things just didn't ground themselves in the previous effort, so they're looking to land in the next evolution.
I know the 5G ACIA people were slightly irritated that they'd gone all through all this work of trying to design what they wanted from 5G, which included the famous 1 millisecond latency. They can't actually buy it because no one's selling it.
Yeah, and then CV to X that was kind of challenged as well.
Yeah, it's like, so the industry in the past have got a history of like getting together and saying, we want this.
Right.
And then not being able to buy it.
Yeah. Although CV2X has some interesting new defense applications that could be very valuable. But see, that's one of the things that I'm fine. Yeah, you made a great observation last year, or even previously. It was actually at MWC Las Vegas about 4 years ago, where the defense industry took a interest in 5G. So that is now playing out even more prominently this year.
Kudu and things like that.
Yeah. Kudu, and that one's really weird. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Kudu and the what was the other thing? The Open Telco AI initiative by GSMA. Any thoughts on that?
No, I haven't looked at that one yet.
Oh, really? Okay.
What was the open? Because there's been several of those sort of things.
I love his look.
Launched about a couple of years ago with a group of 7 operators, because they were talking about it at the
DT, SKT, and a few. I think it's like there's people talking about like a telco language models, and I think the other thing is the word ontology, and there's another phrase which is like ontology, which I can't remember, which crops up quite a lot.
Graph.
It's sort of basically all the stuff you feed into RAG, so that Gen AI actually understands what all the various bits. Sorry?
Retrievers?
Maybe.
Vector data?
No. It's essentially a library of telecoms terminology of all you load in all the standards, you load in all the descriptions of how the bits of networks and OSS and BSS fit together, so that when you ask Gen AI a question, it doesn't sort of go off on complete tangent. You anchor it in telecom language.
Okay.
And so if you're talking about, I don't know whether it's about power or if it's about customers or whatever, it looks through a telecom lens because it's got a telecom essentially dictionary built into the Gen AI, so it doesn't go off on too many hallucinogenic tangents.
Yeah. The only thing I can think of is LoRa, which is a way of extending a foundation model to be more domain specific. But it's part of post training. It's like it's a methodology in post training. But anyway, that's neither here or there. But yeah, no, I think it's really interesting because there's so many efforts to try to make these models domain specific, but then the field is becoming very, very diverse, and the way that you're applying AI is actually vendor specific. It's a competitive advantage, right? So I mean, I almost and like for instance, between Netcracker and Amdocs, the way that they might train an LLM to be optimized for their particular application portfolio will be different, right? And there can be competitive advantages. Having an LLM that's trained on your system or your application ontology, right? Which could be very different from a competitor's. So I don't know. I think people go overboard with open and shared, and sometimes don't appreciate the benefits of competition and differentiation.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of these open efforts become futile. Do you know what I'm saying? They become anti-competitive in a way. I don't know.
I think that coming back to sort of things like Okudu, I think where that makes sense is there are, particularly in defense, I can see why there is a desire to have, in the US, a platform for sort of sovereign radio applications. Maybe you want to plug in a special waveform for something. That makes sense to me, to have the sort of subset of ORAN or something adjacent to it that's relatively constrained, that has obviously a sort of more national or friendly nation spin to it.
Yeah.
So that I can see. It's the same that you see on the spectrum management side of the stuff that is being done by the National Spectrum Consortium in the US and others in other parts of the world. That does make sense to me is to have a certain level of openness. And I think if I look at what's going on with AI native and 6G, a lot of the standardization work is on things like model lifecycle management and data management and sort of signaling between different parts of it. It's not necessarily standardizing the model, it's making sure that some of the hooks and the scaffolding and the frameworks are there. And I can see the logic for that.
Yeah, but even that, I mean, I don't know why you need to standardize any of that stuff. There may be best practices, kind of like agile, right? You just adopt whatever makes sense, but standardizing it, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I think
there are areas. I mean, I'm not sure that I've fully understood this, so I'm in danger of leaping into a deep hole with both feet here. But
just
one of the things we talked about with Dean and I ran an Unthinkable lab about MCP and agentic AI and APIs.
Yeah.
And one of the things, for example, Philippe Onswage, who's the VP of Tech at Orange, he was very interested in having open standards on things like MCP interactions with agentic, so that if you run an agentic query, you get the same thing from different places, so that the format of the query that you runs should be within a certain, within certain bounds, and the output should be in certain bounds. So I think that, and why would you want that for an operator's point of view? Because if you want a standard which is interoperable, then you need that level of compatibility, I think.
And I also think that there's an angle there, which is if something is standardized, then you can get the test vendors to support it. And so I think that a lot of the telecoms industry won't deploy stuff unless there is a box from Keysight or Viavi or whoever it is, right, that flashes a green light and prints out a report, metaphorically. And I think that in order to have a testing suite, you need to know what to test to. And if you want to, and so I know in the UK for ORAN, there's a security testing lab that's sort of government funded to make sure that essentially it's trustworthy. So you need to be able to sort of have things to test to, and then a testing ecosystem to sort of tick the box and flash the green light.
Yeah, but here's the big problem. Agents are very difficult to test. Testing is, no one's cracked a code on that. And also, what was described, what you described, Andrew, is addressed by something that already exists, which is the API. And so this is the problem with what we're seeing with agentic frameworks and agentic AI and MCP, is at the end of the day, what businesses want, what probably consumers want, is something more attuned to, programmatically configured, agent, which is basically takes us back to RPA and workflow management. I mean, that is ironically where we're going, but what I think the industry is trying to do, many industries are trying to do at the moment, because there's so much pressure to adopt AI, is shoehorning all these buzzwords, right? And to make AI fit. But then when you look at the requirement sets and how industries are reacting to what is being presented in front of them, they're realizing, oh, we do have to step this back to the old reliable stuff. And, I'm not trying to sound like a Luddite. It's a true observation, because when you look at the ISVs, the likes of ServiceNow, Salesforce, you name them, they're embedding logic into their and scripting into their agentic frameworks. And guess what? At the end of the day, this just all looks like RPA and the old school stuff, because you're taking away so much agency from the agent. It's no longer fuzzy. It's being programmed.
On the other hand,
for a deterministic outcome.
But otherwise, you end up with a telecom equivalent of OpenClaw, and you basically sort of give it a task or an intent, and it says, make my video run better. And I'm like, well, I can buy some QoS, I can downrate the resolution, I can send letters to all the electors to get them to vote in someone who doesn't like net neutrality. I can sort of knock everyone else off the network by hacking them. So you've got, it's like you need to have some guardrails, because otherwise
you can be a very dangerous person.
He's a very dangerous person, Leonard. You should know this by now.
You have quite the imagination.
But that's what happens if you have open-ended an intent. I'm like, well, yeah, just how far do you want to go? What's your limits on that?
Well, yeah, and then I think it's becoming increasingly known that these models have alignment issues, right? And so these are all these fundamental challenges. You talked about limitations, Dean, that impact the efficacy and viability of any of these permutations of Gen AI above it, including the physical stuff. Even though, like we said, physical's been around. I think if we talk about physical AI in a better way, maybe unpack it to reveal all the stuff that's familiar, then we can figure out how all the new stuff can actually make things meaningful, for the industry.
No, I think that's right. Well, the question is, you got to define is, what is the industry? And is the industry at that point, well, I mean, seriously, is it the robotics industry, or is it the mobile industry, or is it the networks industry, or the cloud industry, or the application side of this, or the enterprises? And everyone, and this is where I came from, Tyranny Consensus, is that everyone's sort of using this nice fuzzy term. They all mean different things by it, but it's it's a nice buzzword to hang all their diverse motivations on.
Yeah, but I think if you unpack it, then you can hold people accountable to their marketing intent. Right?
Hold people accountable to their marketing. That would be an advance. It'll probably put all of us out of a job as well.
Oh no, that's what keeps you busy, Dean. Come on, and you, Andrew. It's all good stuff. Are you okay there, Andrew, or are you just thinking?
No, I was thinking. I mean, I was a bit distracted there, because I was thinking that earlier today I was having a chat with same guy, Philippe, and saying, I was thinking we ought to have a campaign for healthy thinking. Like you've got a campaign for healthy eating. It's like just
Yeah.
because there are thousands of AIs available doesn't mean you should just use them in the same ways that you can
Oh,
buy
absolutely.
millions of hamburgers and different things. And so, sorry, I was just distracted because we went off on an MCP rabbit hole. And I was thinking, yeah, campaign for healthy thinking. It's like, put that AI down for a minute. Pick up a book.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So why don't we do this? Let's start to wrap this up. Any thoughts on what are those key themes that are going to carry the industry through 2026? That will define what we'll be talking about at MWC 2027. And of course, Dean being like not there.
Satellite voice fiber sovereignty.
Yeah, I think voice is a big deal, and it's been deeply unsexy for a number of years. And Dean and I have both been in a combined and separate paths looking at a lot of this.
Yeah.
And I've just almost finished a report on it, and it's just taken me ages because it's just changing so fast. There's so much going on in it, and it's classic telco. It's been unsexy for 15, 20 years. And of course, a lot of people have neglected it, but the clever folk in the other companies, the innovative folk, haven't. So you've got a lot of really interesting companies doing amazing stuff in AI voice, and it does two things. First of all, you've got these new services coming to boot. So you've seen the first ones, which kind of like AI in every call idea, where you just call in your AI to help you translate or take notes or something. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff I've been looking at is more on the enterprise side, where you integrate it into your enterprise operation. And what's really interesting, I think, about that is not just the automation prospects of it, because who wants to put people out of jobs? Well, some people do, but not me. But there are some quite good benefits of it, in the sense of where it's being used to help companies do things better.
Yeah.
But where I think it's really interesting is it turns every call into a proper source of information. So if you use that well, so if you imagine you get all of your calls in one place and you can properly interrogate them in the context of other corporate information, instead of a few lines from your CRM that you've typed in because you're in a hurry and you say, I spoke to Leonard, it was great, we talked about MWC, full stop, goodbye. You've got the whole conversation in there. If you can run your AI on that and the other conversations you've got and the other things like that, you can do so much more. You can identify real-time problems. You can identify trends in operations that you weren't available, that you weren't aware of even. And you can start to understand different needs of customers because you can see across essentially a vastly different landscape of information. So, I'm a big fan of the whole AI voice thing. I think it's fan in the sense I think it's really interesting. Where it goes and what it does, we shall see. But that's in its own right interesting. So, picking up on Dean's theme, satellite's going to be interesting. It was fascinating to see Starlink and SpaceX talking about launching. I can't remember. They were talking about launching 50 satellites with each spaceship the Starship, when they get to launch it, and they're going to launch 1,200 of these things next year in a year.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that's interesting about that, from my perspective, is not the kind of like the shiny tech aspect. It was just I was sat listening to these people and I thought, wow, I'm not sure that I understand what the motivation of people like Elon Musk is doing what he's doing. But you look at the scale of the technological ambition and you feel a little bit kind of like, yeah, this is a bit lacking on the other side of the room. Now, we talked about a lack of R&D and they're very different types of company. But you look at it and you think, my God, the pace of change and the pace of investment in some of this stuff is immense. And we're learning very quickly that it's hard to forecast very far ahead in a lot of this stuff, because each thing interacts with the other thing and changes it. So we've got geopolitical change going on, we've got technological change going on, probably some, how can I put it, socio-economic change going on because of AI, not just the technical stuff. And it's all up in a bloody great melting pot. And, it's very hard to call it even a year out now, I think. Maybe, I'm sure we could write down a list of keywords
Yeah.
But exactly what we would, what's going to be said is hard to judge, I think, at this point. But the topics are probably right. But what
Yeah.
about them?
Yeah. No, that's good. For me, I think trust. So riffing off of the thing that you wrote about that you thought was
Thank you.
important. Definitely. I think given and when we talked about this at the bar at World's End, right? And Dean, you mentioned as well, there's forces that are driving the sovereignty discussion in places that we haven't seen before. And I think work counter to what has benefited the mobile industry for the last few decades. And so I think the thing that the industry is going to have to reckon with this year, given a lot of the geopolitical volatility and conflict, is how does that impact the future of the industry? And then I think also when we look at forward to 6G, how is it going to influence what 6G is going to be about? And maybe even 5G advanced, right? Because, for those who, follow the evolution of the standards and how they're, are cognizant of how the standards are arrived at, it's a tyranny of consensus. Right, Dean? Some will claim it's a tyranny of consensus, and so I don't think a lot of folks recognize that, especially policymakers who might have a naive notion about how these standards are arrived at globally. So that's probably going to be one of the biggest issues. And then for the operators, I think they're going to be grappling with modernization, and hopefully they'll be revisiting the readiness of 5G. I mean, I've been talking about this for quite some time now. We're in a different place with 5G. So is it a time to look beyond the disappointment, the initial disappointment, and then maybe reconsider what the prospects are for 5G, given we have more devices that support 5G, and also, we're release 19. So there's a lot of good features that are being untapped. And so what is that value proposition now at this phase? And, so hopefully the industry for its benefit will reflect on that and maybe, focus on things that matter a bit more than, humanoid robots.
Yeah. But things like indoor connectivity. Actually, one last thing that I picked up. There was a presentation from a futurist I really like called Azim Azar, who's a general futurist who speaks really well. He's got a great podcast. But he was saying that he's currently on, I think he said he's using 100 million tokens a day for his AI agent workforce. And the issue is, and I had a bit of a comment thread with him on my LinkedIn, is how much of that goes over the access network, whether it's fixed to his home or office or over the mobile network, and it's going to be small. And this is a big problem with AI and mobile industry or telecom industry is it's all inside the cloud. And I noticed AT&T and making a big investment announcement, and a lot of that is around long haul fiber for data center interconnect. Because the amount of the AI stuff, which whether it's for robots or just LLMs, that goes over any sort of access network to us, is a tiny, tiny fraction of the total that's going on internally. It's a bit like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where there's this sort of the Earth is actually this computer that's run for millions of years, and it comes up with the answer to the great question of life, the universe, and everything, which is of course 42. In other words, there were 2 bytes of information on the access network after a million years of compute. And I have a feeling we might be heading that direction.
Interesting. Well, that's a nice way of capping up this nice insight to cap off the episode. Gentlemen, thank you so much. It's always fun hanging out with you guys. And Dean, I look forward to hanging out with you next week. Hopefully, you help me find some good places to enjoy here in San Diego. And by the way, if you don't know, I live in San Diego. And Andrew, hopefully one of these days you'll be visiting San Diego and you can help me find good places to eat here as well.
I look forward to that, Leonard. And of course, you remember our agreement. We have to practice so that we are ready for the next
Yes.
jam.
Yes. And Dean, you will be singing your AI generated lyrics on stage. No excuses. So, hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this banter conversation. I know it's been a great learning experience for me having these debates with Dean and Andrew. If you don't already follow them, you should. And by the way, Dean, congratulations on 30,000 followers on LinkedIn. That's a great accomplishment. Kudos.
Thank you. I've got a long way to catch up with you, though. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, you'll eventually get there. No worries. I have no doubt. And so follow him and Disruptive Analysis at www.disruptivedean.com, right?
Dean Bubley is my website, but to be honest, just LinkedIn's easier. LinkedIn's easier, to be honest.
And then, help him get to 180,000 followers. And and of course, Andrew Collinson, the wonderful Andrew Collinson of Connective Insight. Follow him at www.connectiveinsight. That's insight.com. Right?
Just LinkedIn, I'd say the same. And also, I need your help more than Dean does.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So
I haven't been on this trail for as long, and so I'm very grateful to you both for allowing me into your hallowed world of conversations. And no, I genuinely enjoy it. And thank you so much, Leonard.
And make sure, if you want an awesome guitar, by the way, hit up Andrew. Amazing luthier. And that's coming from me. Amazing. Astonishing. So kudos to you. And also, please remember to subscribe to our podcast, which will be featured on the Next Curve YouTube channel. Check out the audio version on Buzzsprout or find us on your favorite podcast platform. Also, subscribe to the Next Curve research portal at www.next-curve.com, as well as our Substack for the tech and industry insights that matter. And we'll see you next time. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you, Leonard. Cheers, dear. Catch you soon. Enjoy your trip, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.